Welcome to my channel. I knew everything would change as soon as I started at the new school. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and moving an hour away from the city definitely took some getting used to. By adjustment, I mean I had to learn to cope with it. At my father's request and my mother's insistence, I kept myself in line and stayed out of trouble. The population was diverse, to say the least. There were a few African Americans, some Hispanics, some Italians and Jews, but the majority were strong-headed Dutch descendants. These weren't Amish or Mennonites, just German Lutherans who dominated the area and everything within it. It was a real melting pot, so I didn't have much trouble fitting in, though I missed my friends from Philadelphia. After finishing school, I stayed in the area, mainly to be close to my family. I still visited my old neighborhood regularly and kept close ties with my old friends. I got my first job as a truck driver delivering heating oil. After a few years, I moved inside the company, handling dispatch and orders. I developed a talent for business and could easily see myself running a similar operation in a few years. I had no trouble finding friends of the opposite sex, and my personal life turned out better than I expected. When I got married, my mother was a bit disappointed that my new wife wasn't Italian, but she did her best to accept Marcy without conditions. After we had 2 children, Marcy insisted I get a vasectomy. I didn't mind, and once the kids started school, Marcy wanted to go back to work. My father never believed it was a good idea for a wife and mother to work. I'm not entirely sure of his reasoning, but looking back, it made some sense. It's not that I was against Marcy working, I just didn't like the fact that she was interacting with people she knew and grew up with. I liked some of her friends, but not all of them. In school, she had participated in all kinds of student activities and really enjoyed them. I stayed away from those things and the people involved in them. I always felt they were a bunch of snobs who just sat around and boosted each other's egos. I knew she had dated others before I met her, just as I had dated before we were together. We never really talked about our pasts, it wasn't a rule, it just happened that way. We had been married for about 10 years when our relationship started to fall apart. Marcy worked in the claims department of a national insurance company. I started to worry when she began working overtime and on weekends. 6 months later, when a seminar came up, I realized I had to do something about it. "Tony, I just don't understand what the problem is. It's only for 3 days. I've already spoken to your mum, and she's agreed to watch the kids while I'm gone. You'll be home in the evenings. I know you can cook for yourself." I couldn't believe she had the nerve to ask me in the first place. "Who's going to this seminar?" She seemed to brighten up a little when I asked. 6 girls from the department, Betty Klink from HR. And Rodney. I smiled when she said his name. I was surprised she didn't realize I knew all about her special lunches and evening meetings with her immediate supervisor, Rodney Foote. Rodney and Marcy had grown up together in school. He was one of those guys who participated in all the clubs and activities except sports. "Do you take me for a fool, Marcy?" I said. "I don't understand." "What are you talking about?" she replied. "I've known about you and Rodney for 6 months now. If you think I'm going to let you go away with him for 3 days, you're out of your mind." "Tony, what are you saying?" "Rodney is my boss. There's nothing between us. I would never even think of betraying you, you know that." I looked at the empty Budweiser can in my hand, stood up slowly from the chair, and headed to the kitchen. I crushed the thin aluminum can in my hand and tossed it toward the trash. I missed, but I didn't bother picking it up. I opened a new can with a hiss and sat back down. Marcy just sat there, waiting for my response. "You're the mother of my kids, and as a mom, you're doing a good job. That's the only reason I haven't kicked you out." I talked to my mom and explained everything to her. She told me to stay strong and hope you'd end this for the kids' sake. "If I leave, the court will give you my kids, and I can't let that happen." "Did you tell your mom that I'm cheating on you?" Marcy asked. "No," I replied. "A woman from the church told her, and I just didn't deny it when she confronted me. You can't be serious." "I don't believe you. Why are you saying all this?" I took a big sip of my beer and smiled. "Rodney lives at 321 David Drive, only 3 blocks from your office. You go there with your boss 3 times a week, and you stay for almost 3 hours each time. What are you doing at his apartment for 3 hours? After you explain that, maybe you can tell me about the overtime you've been doing at work. Did you know the cleaning lady from your office also goes to church with my mum?" Her eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip trembled. "As long as you don't publicly disgrace me or my family, I won't take action. If that changes, all bets are off. You can leave or stay, but you will never take my boys from me." Clearly upset, she jumped to her feet. "Damn you, Tony! I hate you, you spaghetti-eating bastard," she yelled and ran out of the room crying. It was the first time she had cursed at me and made a derogatory comment about my background. Her Dutch side had finally shown itself. We had 2 boys, Terry and Rick, who shared a room with a bunk bed. The 3rd bedroom was a guest room, and from that day on I slept there. It was a rental house, and we had saved over $60,000 for a down payment on our dream home, but my dream had turned into a farce. Nothing more was said about the seminar. Marcy stopped working overtime and started bringing her own lunch to work. The atmosphere at home wasn't just cold, it was icy and uncomfortable. My mom didn't hear any more updates from her church friends. Everything seemed to settle down, but I felt uneasy. There was no intimacy during that time, and I knew I couldn't tolerate it much longer. Against my better judgment, I agreed to accompany Marcy to her company's Christmas party. I didn't want her to go alone and thought I could get through the evening quietly, staying out of the way. It seemed like a solid plan, but had its flaws. The company rented a hall with a dance floor, a buffet table, and several open bars. I managed to have 3 beers during the evening without feeling their effects. By the time we arrived, the only available tables were near the higher-ups of the company. It was clear everyone else was avoiding those spots. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. I noticed Rodney across the room with some of his friends. A few guys Marcy worked with asked her to dance, but Rodney stayed on the sidelines. I was glad I let her dance since I had no desire to join. I had just started my 3rd beer when I noticed Marcy and Rodney exchanging glances, mostly nods and slight gestures, but something was definitely going on. I did my best to look bored and uninterested, but I kept a close watch on them. My wife excused herself to go to the ladies' room, and I quickly scanned the room, noticing that Rodney was also gone. It was unbelievable. After everything we had talked about at home, it was beyond foolish for her to even try to meet up with him while I was in the same building. She could see him at work any time without anyone stopping her. I started thinking the only reason she might be doing this was to humiliate me, to make me look like a fool. Meeting Rodney during a work party would be a public insult. His friends, who were standing near one of the bars with wide grins on their faces, seemed to know something. Marcy glanced back to check if I was still in my place, then disappeared down the hallway leading to the restrooms. I stopped by the main table on my way to the restroom, leaned in, and apologized for interrupting the party just to get their attention. The guys at the other end of the room, who had been grinning foolishly, suddenly stopped smiling. They looked uneasy, unsure of how to help their buddy Rodney. I first checked the ladies' room, but it was empty. In the men's restroom, I wasn't as fortunate. From that moment, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. They were kissing, he had his back to me and his hand was up her skirt. There was no sign of resistance from her. I grabbed Rodney from behind by the neck and stepped to the side before slamming his head into the bathroom tiles. Something definitely broke. I heard my wife calling my name repeatedly, but I completely ignored her. I turned Rodney around and blood from his broken nose splattered on my shirt. He slumped but stayed on his feet, so I landed a solid punch to his stomach. He collapsed, vomiting immediately. Marcy pulled at my jacket sleeve, trying in vain to stop me. It was silent in the main hall when I dragged Rodney out by his tie. I might have been choking him, but I didn't care. The band had stopped playing, and everyone was watching as I dropped him to the floor. I looked around to see if anyone wanted to help him, but no one did. Sorry for ruining your wonderful party. I'm leaving now, but I'll leave my wife here to entertain you. Take her home when you're done. Rodney was on all fours. Trying to get up his face was a bloody mess. Marcy stood in the doorway, mouth open. It was hard to tell if she was upset about what I had done to her lover or about what I had just said to her co-workers. In truth, it didn't matter to me. I noticed that Rodney was standing right under the mistletoe, and I couldn't help myself. Before leaving, I gave him a kick he would remember for a week. He immediately collapsed forward, hitting his face on the floor again. It must have hurt. No one said a word. I called my mum from the car and asked her to pick up the boys. Leaving town for a few days seemed like a good idea, and I didn't want to leave the kids with their mother. I was sure she wouldn't be able to take proper care of them. As I drove, I made plans without really knowing what I would do or where I would go. My boss didn't mind giving me a week off. By the time I got home, Mum and Dad were already there. After paying the babysitter, I helped the boys pack. My bag mostly contained socks and underwear, but I threw in a few shirts and pants just in case. Before leaving, I took the money box from the basement rafters. Banks were paying less than % on savings accounts, so I decided to keep the money at home. I know it's not wise to keep $62,000 in cash at home, but I guess that's something I inherited from my mom. She used to keep large stashes of supplies all around the kitchen. I was just turning off the lights when a taxi pulled up, and Marcy got out. She came in and sat quietly on the couch. She looked more concerned than angry, more upset than scared. I told you there was only one rule: don't humiliate me or my family in public. You just couldn't resist, could you? I waited a moment for her to start crying, then walked out the door. It was just after 9 when I got on the Schuylkill Expressway. Damn, the party hadn't lasted long, at least not for me. I decided to spend a few days in Atlantic City before heading back home, but first I needed to visit my old friend S. S owned a diner in the old neighborhood. It wasn't one of those flashy spots you see on travel shows about Philadelphia, but more of a local hangout. His main income came from other ventures that most of us either ignored or quietly took part in. He lived upstairs and worked in the back room. It felt like old times. After I explained my situation, he agreed to help me. "Tony, this is going to cost you 20 grand. Are you going to handle this yourself, or should I arrange an alibi for you?" "I've thought it through. No problem." "Do you want things to get messy or stay quiet?" "Clean. No mess. Nothing." "You're going to need to be away for a few days. Have you made any plans?" "No, I was thinking about heading to Atlantic City." "How about 6 days and 7 nights at the TSH Hotel?" "What are you talking about, SS?" "I've got some future plans. I think it'd be good for you." "Sounds tempting. You going alone, Tony?" "Yeah, this all happened spontaneously. I didn't have time to invite anyone along." "You shouldn't be alone. You need someone to confirm you were there." "Hold on a minute." S picked up the phone and dialed a number he clearly knew well. "Carla, it's S. Get ready and come over here." There was a brief pause. "No, nothing like that. You're going on a vacation," he chuckled as he hung up. "Tony, do you remember Carla, my brother Michael's oldest daughter?" "Yeah, the chubby little girl with dark brown eyes. I remember she was always laughing." "How old is she now?" S smiled when I remembered his niece. "She's 23 now, Tony, and she's not chubby anymore." Suddenly, I realized Carla was going to join me on this trip. I felt a bit awkward since she was S's niece, but well, he had arranged everything. "Tony, do you have a credit card?" "I've got 2 of them. I was planning to cancel them on Monday morning." "No, don't do that. I want you to use those cards as much as possible: dining out, room service. Maybe even some cash advances at the casino, but don't go overboard. You need to leave a trail to prove you were there. Space out the charges so it doesn't look like you could have snuck back home. It might cost you a couple of thousand, but that's cheap insurance." S knew his business. Everything made sense. As I was processing all of this, Carla walked in. "Tony, I haven't seen you since you moved away. You're looking good now." I understood why S had been smiling. Carla was stunning. She had those striking dark eyes, and her childhood chubbiness seemed to have shifted to her figure. In my awkwardness, I nearly knocked over my chair when I stood up. "Tony needs someone to keep him company in Atlantic City for a few days. Are you up for it?" S asked her. Her mood seemed to shift slightly when he said that. "Aren't you still married?" she asked, directing the question at me. Before I could respond, S jumped in. "His marriage is over, Carla. Tony just needs some company right now. I knew you always liked him, so I thought of you first." "S, I'm not going to break up anyone's family. It's unfair of you to ask me. Besides, I'm not one of your girls. Why don't you send one of them instead?" "I'm not expecting you to sleep with him. Just keep him company and help him forget his problem." Carla had a puzzled look on her face, as if she had just realized something. She wasn't just beautiful, she was sharp, too. "I'm sorry," she said, glancing between S and me with a slight smile. "I'd be happy to go with you, Tony, but you have to promise to buy me some saltwater taffy." Now we were all smiling. "Give me about an hour to get ready, and don't let him drink anything. S, I don't want to be traveling with a drunk." I think I saw her wink at me as she went to get her things. While Carla was gone, S and I continued our conversation. He gladly accepted my $20,000 and promised complete satisfaction. The trip to Atlantic City was uneventful, except I had to explain to Carla in detail about the issues I was having with Marcy. Her only comment was, "Oh, the poor kids." Carla frowned when she saw the two beds, but luckily she didn't notice my quiet chuckle. I was pretty sure that by the end of the week we'd only be using one of them all in due time. We did some light gambling but didn't go overboard. I was smart enough to know that in the end the house always wins. Carla was happy playing the quarter slots, and I was just looking for ways to pass the time. We spent more time eating and walking along the boardwalk than anything else. Of course, we went to all the shows in town. The first night I acted like a true gentleman, but by midday of the second day things had heated up between Carla and me. My mom had been right, I should have married an Italian. It felt natural, and I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong. On the fourth day we were getting ready for dinner when we had visitors. There were two of them, not in suits but in casual jackets. Tony Randazzo, I'm Ray Fritz, and this is my partner, Rupert Marks. We're with the Special Crime Unit from Berks County. Can we have a few minutes of your time? Carla came out of the bathroom in her bra and panties. She glanced at the two men, then walked over to the bed to grab her robe. She seemed a bit embarrassed but understood they were probably there to see me. "Can you give me an idea of what this is about?" I asked. "We'd like to talk about your relationship with Rodney Foote." I didn't have a relationship with Rodney Foote. My wife did. For some reason they seemed a bit uncomfortable. Fritz did all the talking while Rupert was busy staring at Carla. "We understand that, Mr. Randazzo. We also understand you had an altercation with him last Friday at the company's Christmas party." "Why are you asking? Is he pressing charges?" "No, he's gone missing, and we were hoping you might help us find him." "Gentlemen, before we go any further, I'd like to have someone from the Atlantic City Police Department present, and I don't mean someone in a blue suit. If you can't arrange that, I'll need a lawyer. My lawyer is from Reading." They didn't respond immediately. "Carla, get dressed, we're going to dinner." "Sorry guys, but we have a reservation for 6. The steaks at Safari are fantastic. I'll probably be back home this Friday. Do you want me to come in and talk to you then?" They looked a little stunned. "Why do you think something happened to this guy?" "Maybe he just left town for a while," I said. "The taxi picked him up on Sunday morning when he checked out of General Hospital, and no one has seen him since Carla finished getting dressed, and I was putting on my jacket." "All right, I've been here since Friday evening and the hotel staff can confirm that. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're off to have some steaks. Do you have any more questions?" "Yes, but they can wait until Friday. We'll expect you then." I simply nodded and gently showed them to the door. We all took the elevator down together without saying another word. When we reached the lobby, they spoke with the hotel security while Carla and I went for a walk. Terry and Rick pounced on me when I got home. The saltwater taffy made everything even sweeter. Marcy, on the other hand, was a bit distant. It was clear she had no idea what was expected of her after the conversation with the police. I spent the rest of the day with the boys. That evening I planned to talk to Marcy. The boys settled in front of the TV for the night, so I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Marcy to finish cleaning up. She took longer than usual, but I stayed where I was. Eventually she turned to me and sat down, resting her elbows on the plastic tabletop. "What did you do to Rodney?" Her tone wasn't angry or demanding, but she seemed genuinely worried. She looked at me, then glanced toward the other end of the room, waiting for an answer. "I was in Atlantic City all week. I haven't seen Rodney since the party. You heard about him?" "I hope so. He spent 2 days in the hospital. You broke his jaw and his nose. He deserved it." She seemed to run out of questions. "What were you doing with him in the men's restroom?" I waited a few seconds, but she didn't answer. "Why did he put his hand under your skirt?" Still no response. Marcy wrung her hands and stared at the tabletop. "Why aren't you at work? And why are the kids home on a school day?" "I had to quit my job. I couldn't go back there again. I pulled the boys out of school because your mother said you might be home today." It was time for a confrontation. "I told you there was only one rule: you can't do anything that would humiliate me or my family. A simple rule. Why did you feel the need to ruin everything by breaking that agreement? You both felt you had to do something. Why?" The longer we sat, the more nervous Marcy became. I slammed my fist on the table. I asked, "Why, damn it?" "Answer me. I don't know why. It just happened. You were sitting in the corner like a lost puppy, and we felt like we could take advantage of the situation. We had no idea you'd lose your mind. You acted like a madman." I was scared to death. At least I got some emotion out of her. Of course, none of it made sense. I didn't even bother to analyze what she said. It was foolish of them to do what they did while I was there. They had weeks to meet before the party, and I would have never known. No. The only reason they chose the time and place was to humiliate me. All her rambling didn't change that. Marcy, you have 3 options. You can stay here and be a good mother to your kids, you can divorce me and leave without the children, or you can just disappear. If you stay, we will no longer live as husband and wife, and I won't tolerate any affairs with Rodney or anyone else. At the mention of Rodney's name, Marcy broke down in tears. Before she could make a decision, she ran out of the room sobbing. I figured we'd finish this conversation tomorrow. Adjustments were made. I rented a small apartment a few blocks from the house. It was close enough for the boys to come over any time they wanted. Carla moved in with me. The police spoke to me a few more times, then stopped bothering me. Rodney had been picked up by a taxi outside the hospital, and no one had seen him since. His family offered a reward for any information, but nothing came up. Every evening I had dinner with Marcy and the boys, and on weekends I spent as much time with my sons as possible. It was obvious to everyone that Marcy and I were no longer a couple, though we were still married. Marcy spent a lot of time with her parents and sister, and I didn't have a problem with that. There were no signs that she was seeing anyone else. She quit her job right after the Christmas party and didn't seem interested in finding another one. We never finished the conversation we had on that first night when I came home. She played the role of a good mother. The house was always in order, the boys were well fed, and they wore clean clothes. I took care of the lawn and handled the household chores. Every week Marcy received $200 for groceries, household expenses, and her personal needs. I always asked if she needed more, but she always declined. We no longer had credit cards. For Thanksgiving and Christmas, the boys and I spent time with my family. Carla usually joined us. Marcy spent the holidays with her family but spent Christmas Eve with the boys. Whenever Terry or Rick tried to talk about the relationship between their mother and me, it became awkward. We both refused to discuss it with them. I appreciated that from her, but what could she say? This charade went on for years. Of course, my brief explanations don't fully capture what was really happening. There were constant complications and disagreements, but we managed to get through them. Initially, things were good between Carla and me, but over time she started spending more time with her family in Philadelphia and less with me. I couldn't blame her. I owed her for all the effort she put in to help make the separation easier for us. Given the circumstances, I couldn't divorce Marcy, and as long as the boys were living at home, I couldn't force her out. These were boundaries I had set for myself, but I made myself stick to them. I despised the entire situation but couldn't think of an alternative. However, the boys eventually did. Terry was 16 when things finally reached a breaking point. A new student at school, who was related to my wife's former lover, kept provoking Terry about the situation. It was the first time this had happened, and Terry was unprepared for it. Rodney's nephew ended up in the hospital, and I had to pick Terry up from school. He was suspended for 2 weeks and faced possible assault charges. Unfortunately, Rick was there when the conflict escalated and tried to help his brother, losing 2 teeth in the process but earning Terry's admiration. When I brought the boys home, Marcy met us at the door. Terry immediately began yelling at his mother for not telling them what had happened years ago. Marcy didn't defend herself. She just stood there and listened as her eldest son vented his anger. I left them alone and took Rick to the dentist. Rick didn't seem too upset about losing his teeth, but I wasn't thrilled about the upcoming dental costs. When we returned, Marcy was gone. Her car was still there, but that was it. Terry said she grabbed her purse and left without saying a word or giving any explanation. I took a week off work to try to sort things out, but Marcy's parents and sister refused to speak to me. A week passed and I still had no idea where she was or what her intentions were. Carla and I moved into the house. At first it felt awkward sleeping in the same bed, but the boys adjusted much easier than I had expected. Everything that belonged to Marcy or was associated with her disappeared from the house one day while I was at work. I didn't know what Carla did with it, and I never asked. Carla took over all the responsibilities Marcy had previously managed. I got her a few credit cards to simplify things. It was strange that I trusted my girlfriend more than I ever trusted my wife. I sold Marcy's car and bought a new one for Carla. Family gatherings became much less tense under the new circumstances. Carla was much happier, and my mum was delighted. Terry and Rick had no more. issues at school, and Rodney's nephew never returned. Finally, everything seemed to settle down. Though I was still technically married, I waited 2 months before going to the police to report Marcy missing. In reality, I filed her as a runaway spouse, intending to use this report when filing for divorce, citing abandonment. I waited another 2 months and then filed the divorce papers. She had to be gone for a full year before the divorce could be finalized. I had planned everything in advance. Family life returned to normal. Terry and Rick became close to Carla without any problems. They never called her mom, always just Carla. But that was fine. We felt more like a family than we had in years. Then, out of the blue, I was officially granted the divorce. I was a free man 2 weeks later. Carla and I drove to Elton and got married. We were a family again. Terry finished high school and joined the Air Force a year later, while Rick decided to go to Toledo University. Everything happened so quickly that soon it was just Carla and me. We never heard from Marcy again. My parents moved to Ocala and made everyone promise to visit at least twice a year. With nothing holding us back, Carla and I moved back to Philadelphia. After graduation, Rick opened a tiny butcher shop in Westchester. We saw him a few times a month, and he always had something exciting to share. About a year later, one of Carla's nieces was getting married, and of course we had to attend. An Italian wedding is a big event, lots of people, mostly family, but also many freeloaders looking for drinks and free food. It didn't matter because there was plenty to see and enjoy. We were sitting with friends enjoying the evening when I noticed Carla seemed a little uneasy. She glanced around a few times as if she were looking for something. I threw a few quick glances myself but didn't see anything unusual. I forgot about it until my wife, after excusing herself, got up to go to the restroom. Something didn't feel right. I watched her walk to the far end of the room, where she met one of her old friends. There was a lot of chatting and some showing off, but everything appeared to be going smoothly. Carla never made it to the restroom. Instead, she approached one of S's assistants. She gestured toward the table where her friend had just been. At the table sat 3 guys and 3 girls. The guys were trying to act tougher than they were, while the girls were overdressed and seemed out of place. Carla returned with a thoughtful but confident look on her face. "Tony, we've got a bit of a problem. I figured that from the way you were moving around the room. Care to explain?" "Listen, you need to stay calm. In a few minutes, one of the guys at Gina's table is going to come over here and try to provoke you." "What do you mean by provoke?" "He's going to say something rude about me to upset you. When you go outside to confront him, all 3 of them will jump you." "What am I supposed to do?" "Let him get away with it. Or play along with him, at least until Bobby V and the other guys get into position. You might have to deal with one of them, but that'll be the worst of it." "What do you mean by play along?" "Let him insult me and then agree with him. If he calls me a name, ask him how much he's willing to pay. Something like that. Whatever you do, don't let him get under your skin." What led to all of this? What did I do to these guys? Look at Gina's table. See that woman with the short platinum hair? Yeah, look closer. Holy crap, that's Marcy. What the hell is Marcy doing here? Marcy's boyfriend is somehow connected to the bride. Looks like she's still mad at you and convinced him to set you up when she realized you were here. I think she's out for revenge, while you and Sal's guys handle things. Gina and I will have a talk with Marcy in the restroom. It won't be pretty. I didn't like where things were going. This was a wedding, and the young bride would remember this night for the rest of her life. It wasn't fair for a couple of thugs to ruin everything. 10 minutes later, I saw the guy with Marcy stand up. I got up too and apologized to everyone at the table. Carla gave me a strange look but seemed to understand. I casually made my way over to the side fire exit, where everyone went to smoke. The guy nodded, and 2 others got up to follow him. What they didn't notice were the 3 guys approaching them from behind, coming from the back of the bar holding baseball bats they had hidden behind the counter. There were about 6 guys smoking by the fire exit. When I told them to clear out, they left without any argument. I guess there was a certain firmness in my voice. I walked about 20 steps from the door, stopped, and turned around. The 3 guys came out smiling, but their smiles quickly faded. Within seconds, they heard the door close behind them. The smiles disappeared when they turned around and saw the 3 men with bats, along with the bride's father. It was all over in less than 30 seconds. I didn't have to lift a hand. I apologize for any inconvenience I may have caused you or your family on this special evening, I said, feeling like a character from The Godfather. Thank you for having the decency to step outside, he replied, shaking my hand before heading back to his daughter. I thanked S's guys for their help and went to find Carla. They stayed behind to clean things up. I felt it was time to leave. Carla was nowhere to be found, and the table where Marcy had been sitting was empty. Rick was there with a few of his friends and had heard about the commotion. He found me at the bar ordering another beer. Dad, what the heck is going on? My first instinct was to bite my tongue and say nothing. That didn't work. Your mom was here with her new boyfriend. That's all I need to know, he said with a grin, turning to the bartender to order a beer for himself. We sat and talked about various things for about an hour. Finally, Carla appeared, looking a bit disheveled. Where have you been? She gave me a sly smile. Gina and I had to take your ex-wife to the hospital. She wasn't feeling too well. Rick and I couldn't help but laugh. Tony, can we go home now? It had been a long night, but it was a lot of fun. We never saw Marcy again. Carla and I are still together, living in the old neighborhood. Life is good. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.